Here's a small experiment that has been run in one form or another many times, and it tends to expose something most of us would rather not know about ourselves. You bring people into a lab and tell each of them they get to hand out two tasks. One is pleasant, with a real reward attached. The other is dull and thankless. They can assign one task to themselves and the other to a stranger they'll never meet. And to help them be fair, you leave a coin on the table. They can flip it if they like. Heads, the stranger gets the good task. Tails, they do. Nobody is watching the flip. Now, most people, asked outright, will tell you the fair thing is to flip the coin. They believe in fairness. They'd say so on a survey, and here is what the psychologist Daniel Batson actually found when he ran versions of this. The people who didn't flip overwhelmingly gave themselves the good task. No surprise, but the people who did flip the coin in private also gave themselves the good task about as often, which is statistically impossible if they were honoring the flip. They flipped, the coin told some of them to take the bad task and they quietly ignored it, and then they walked out feeling like fair people who had let chance decide. Batson even tried labeling the sides of the coin so there could be no confusion about which outcome was which. It didn't matter. People found a way to get the good task and keep the hello. Batson gave this a precise and devastating name. He called it moral hypocrisy, and he defined it as the desire to appear moral while, if you can manage it, avoiding the cost of actually being moral, not appearing moral to other people. That part we already suspect about ourselves. Appearing moral to ourselves. The whole machinery is aimed inward. We are running a con, and the mark is the person in the mirror. Think about what the coin flip really reveals. It's not that people are selfish. Everyone knows people are selfish. It's that people are selfish and then successfully convince themselves they were fair in the same motion, without noticing the switch. They wanted the reward and they wanted to be the kind of person who plays fair, and rather than choose between those two things, they found a way to feel like they had both. That's the move. Not lying to the world, lying to yourself and believing it. Because believing it is the only way to keep the self-image intact while still taking the prize. So before you decide this is about other people, sit with the discomfort that it's almost certainly about you too. Because you do have a gap, everyone does. There is this set of values you would recite if I asked you what kind of person you are. And then there is the actual record of what you do when those values cost you something. And for almost all of us, those two things do not match nearly as well as we assume. The strange part isn't the gap is human. The strange part is that we so rarely notice it. And the reason we don't notice it is that we come equipped with a brilliant device for hiding it from ourselves. To understand that device, you have to understand something unsettling about how moral thinking actually works. And here the psychologist Jonathan Haidt did the clearest work. We like to imagine that we reason our way to our moral conclusions, that we weigh the considerations, think it through, and then arrive like a fair judge at a verdict about what's right. Haidt's research suggests this is almost exactly backwards. What actually happens most of the time is that we have an instant gut reaction, a flash of intuition or self-interest, and the verdict is essentially decided in that flash. And only then does the reasoning start up, not to find the truth, but to build a case for the conclusion we already reached. Haidt called it the emotional dog and its rational tail. The intuition is the dog. Your careful reasoning is just the tail wagging along behind, going wherever the dog already decided to go. This is why your explanations for your own behavior come so fast and feel so completely convincing. You are not actually a judge weighing the evidence about whether you did the right thing. You are a defense attorney and your client is yourself, and you have never once lost a case. Notice it next time. The instant you do something that cuts against your stated values, a reason appears fully formed for why this particular situation was different, why you were justified, why it doesn't count. That reason did not come from honest reflection. It was manufactured on demand by the part of you whose only job is to keep you innocent. The speed of the excuse is the tell. Truth is slow. Defense is instant. And when even the defense attorney can't quite close the gap, when you've clearly done something that contradicts who you believe you are, the mind has one more trick, and it's maybe the most remarkable of all. It doesn't change the behavior to match the belief. It changes the belief to match the behavior. Back in 1959, Leon Festinger and a colleague had people do an excruciatingly boring task for an hour and then paid them to go tell the next person that it had been fun and interesting. In other words, they paid people to lie. Some were paid $20, a real sum at the time. Some were paid $1. And then the researchers asked everyone how enjoyable the boring task had actually been. The people paid $20 correctly remembered it as dull, but the people paid only $1 reported that the task had genuinely been kind of enjoyable. Why? Because $20 was enough reason to tell a lie. You could say to yourself, I lied, but I did it for the money and feel fine. $1 wasn't enough cover. So rather than sit with the discomfort of having lied for almost nothing, their minds quietly rewrote the memory. It wasn't a lie if the task was actually fun. So the task became fun. They changed the truth inside their own heads to make themselves honest again. Festinger called the engine behind this cognitive dissonance the deep discomfort we feel when our actions and our self-image don't line up. And the crucial discovery is the direction we usually resolve it. Almost never by admitting we did wrong. Almost always by adjusting the story until the wrong disappears. Put these three together and you have a complete factory for self-deception. First, you act mostly on instinct and self-interest. Second, your reasoning rushes in afterward to justify whatever you just did. And third, if any gap remains between your behavior and your values, you resolve it by quietly editing your values, not your behavior. The result is a person who can do almost anything and still believe they're good. Not because they're a monster, but because the equipment is working perfectly. Every one of us is walking around inside a story about ourselves that has been carefully, continuously edited by the one narrator who can never be trusted, because the narrator is also the suspect. At this point, you might expect the conclusion to be bleak. If we are all hypocrites, if goodness is mostly a flattering story we tell ourselves, then why bother with morality at all? Isn't it all just performance? But here is where a French aristocrat writing 350 years ago saw something the cynics miss. In his collection of maxims, the Duc de la Rochefoucauld wrote a single line that turns the whole thing around. Hypocrisy, he said, is the tribute that vice pays to virtue. Sit with that because it's doing something subtle. The hypocrite, the one who fakes goodness while behaving badly, is still by the very act of faking admitting that goodness is the standard. If virtue were worthless, no one would bother to counterfeit it. You don't forge something nobody values. The fact that we go to such elaborate lengths to seem good, even to ourselves, is backhanded proof that good still rules us. The hypocrite has not escaped morality. The hypocrite is bowing to it just dishonestly. This is the difference between honesty about hypocrisy and cynicism about it, and everything depends on which one you choose. The cynic looks at the coin flip, at the self-serving reasoning, at the edited memories, and concludes that since everyone's a hypocrite, the values are fake and nothing matters. That's the lazy exit. And it's also a con, because look what it conveniently does. It frees the cynic from ever having to try. But the honest version goes the other way. Yes, the gap is real and it's in all of us. And the gap only stings because the values are real too. You can't be a hypocrite about something you don't believe in. Your hypocrisy is not proof that your ideals are empty. It's proof that you have them. So, what do you actually do with a mind built to deceive you about your own goodness? You can't simply decide to stop because the deception runs underneath your awareness. And the part of you that would do the deciding is the same lawyer who's been lying to you all along. But there is one move available, and it's the whole game. You stop trying to win the case. You take that gap between what you say you value and what you actually do when it costs you. And instead of letting the defense attorney explain it away, you treat it as the single most honest piece of information you have about yourself. Your values are what you'll claim under no pressure. Your character is what's left when the pressure is on and the coin comes up tails. When you catch the excuse arriving too fast, too smooth, too convenient, you don't believe it just because it's yours. You get curious about it. You ask the question the lawyer doesn't want asked. Would I accept this excuse from someone else or only from me? That's it. Not the impossible task of becoming someone with no gap, because that person is just a hypocrite who stopped looking. The achievable thing is to become someone who has stopped defending the gap and started studying it. The honest person was never the one who behaves perfectly. No one does. The honest person is the one who has finally turned around to face their own hypocrisy, stopped reaching for the next excuse, and let the uncomfortable truth stand there, unargued with, because that discomfort, the thing the whole machine exists to make you not feel, turns out to be the only reliable compass you've got. Everyone is a hypocrite. The rare and decent thing is to be one who knows it and who, just often enough, lets that knowing change what they do next.